Our guest today is Christopher Mitchell. He is with the Institute of Local Self-Reliance. And that website that we've been talking about a lot on this show is muninetworks.org. And what's your Twitter handle, Chris?
Community Nets.
That's right, Community Nets. And this is an important piece of our continued quest for municipal broadband. Municipal broadband is a task that I've taken on here where I live, Chris, particularly in the Pasadena neighborhood. And I actually have some interesting news for you about that I want to run by you. But we're going to ease into that first. Tell people in your words what exactly municipal broadband is and what Muni Network's role in that pertains.
Sure, I'd love to do that. I kind of start at the top with people talk about community networks, and we think of community networks as broadly networks that are designed to really be responsive to the community. And that takes two forms: municipal networks, Muni networks, as you mentioned, and then also cooperatives, which are more common in rural areas. Those are the two main forms. So there's a lot of different terminology, but that's how we sort of separate them out. And municipal networks are the kind of community network that are owned by a local government, usually a city, a town, sometimes a township or county, depending on where you are. And those have taken many different forms, from citywide networks offering all kinds of services, like Chattanooga is one of the most famous ones, to more modest networks, as Pasadena has operated for many years, where they're kind of focused on some businesses, and most residents haven't really seen a direct advantage from them.
So let's get into what you're offering communities right now. I mean, recently you guys made a post that you're offering different communities an assessment. Is that correct?
Yes, we've created something we call the Community Network Quick Start, and that is in cooperation with another company here out of Minnesota, where I'm based, in which for communities that are interested, we do kind of a basic assessment to really give you a real ballpark figure of what it would cost to connect all of the premises in a target area, all the homes and businesses, with fiber or with wireless or with both. So there's three different approaches that, if you give us a target area, we'll give you back a very assessment using a number of different assumptions that we work with you to make sure they're correct. And then on top of that, we give you some recommendations. We do a meeting with you to give you some guidelines. And the goal is that for a community that's getting started with this, rather than spending a lot of time and money and then only months down the line getting this information, we try to give it to you up front and say, in your community, you may not want to try to do what Chattanooga did. Maybe you want to try and do what this other community did, what Mount Vernon did in Washington, or something like that, to try to give people a sense of what their particular assets and challenges. And then the final thing I would say is, it's a commonly overlooked issue, but what are the actual goals? I think someone like you're pretty technical. You're probably, that you want to have high quality broadband available to everyone. And the question is, to what end? And in answering that, it will determine the business model and financing strategy and things like that, which may vary depending on the different goals beyond just having better broadband.
So let me break this down. As far as getting municipal broadband, and when we say municipal broadband, what we mean is the internet is a public utility in your community. Right. The communities that have done this: Sandy, Oregon; Chattanooga, Tennessee; Tacoma, Washington, they experience the best internet in the country at a reasonable price, because they cut out the corporate middleman, your AT&Ts, your Comcast, and they just serve the people. So
if you don't mind, I'll throw in there.
No,
There's
please.
Still in the community, because sometimes people get sensitive about this and they think that Chattanooga has kicked Comcast out of town. And what's interesting is you get a new choice. And so you can take service without that corporate middleman. Or for people who prefer to go with Comcast, they'll often get better deals because of the competition. So I'm just a little sensitive to that, because we're talking about adding choice, not detracting from it.
Okay. I suppose that's noble. I, on the other hand, love the idea of driving them out of town. I love the idea of driving all of them out of town and putting all of them out of business. And then the employees, who it is not their fault, they can go work for the community broadband. That's what I like to see. But I understand,
There's a lot of people who share your opinion. I've certainly
baby
run
steps,
across
baby
right,
steps. I
right.
get it. But but so getting back to this, when getting back to the assessment,
Mhm.
there are a multiple number of ways that this can be accomplished in a community. For some, fiber to the home is the way to go. That is typically the most cost extensive
Yes.
way. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
But there are other options. There is also a mass wireless option. Now, is that what people refer to as mesh networks?
Some do, yes. Now, it's worth saying, I feel like there's still some of these areas are a little bit of a frontier. Fiber to the home is the most costly, but it's also something that it's well understood. Wireless approaches are evolving and evolving faster than I expected them to, frankly. We're seeing more opportunities because anyone who's been following this space for 10 years may remember Wi Fi, and there was an effort to do citywide Wi Fi, but the technology was not well suited to that. And the results were both public and private business models did not do well. But there are new wireless options that are doing better, that are more suited to urban environments. So that is an approach. Now, the mesh wireless, which we see out of like Red Hook in Brooklyn, and there's a number of these networks. There's one in Kansas City. They are typically more localized in a neighborhood. And actually, I should also just plug Portland has Personal Telco, which does a great job in Portland, Oregon. But those are typically not citywide solutions to date. Those are more of a volunteer run, in some cases hobbyist, in some cases focused on the digital divide. And that's also the case in Detroit with the Equity Internet Initiative. They do terrific work for that. So there's some different goals and there's some different experience with that, but we've not seen mesh wireless on a citywide level, to my knowledge.
Well, so I've heard a few things, and I'm still learning about that part specifically too. But you can probably speak to this better than I can. I've heard a few things in regards to the safety of mesh networks. Have you? Can you speak to that at all? Like, is that a proper thing to be wary of? Like,
I,
it's not safe for people, or
I don't think so. I mean,
okay?
it's there's an issue that I wouldn't say definitively that we shouldn't worry about radiation and wireless in all cases. I think the issue that you might be conflating two things. One is the 5G wireless, which is coming out now, where if you drive down the street and you see a big tower that often has like three straight short antennas on it, those are typically what we call macro cells for our mobile wireless devices. In order to provide better service, carriers are moving from those sorts of big towers to towers that are closer to the street and maybe closer to people's homes. And there's a concern that that radiation coming off of them would be at levels that has not been properly studied. But I would say that in everything that I've seen in the scientific studies, that the number one concern that we still have about any sort of link with cancer is from these things, because the radio is right here and it's right next to your head. And so I don't think that even the small cells or the wireless mesh, I don't think there's a problem, because mostly people aren't putting their head right up next to them for hours at a time. I think if you're constantly, even if you're always 20 yards away from one, the power level is low enough that I find it unlikely that there's going to be any sort of health problem resulting from that.
Okay. All right. So let's go down the other ways to do this typically then. So is it just there's just wireless via mesh networks where you have what are commonly referred to as super nodes, and that's basically just your big antenna with the internet connection, and then it goes into different wireless networks. They actually did a study up in Canada on what they're doing in different neighborhoods in New York City. I know Brooklyn's one of them, and I think there's a couple others as well,
Right.
where they're building the mesh networks. So that's one way to do it. There's also fiber to the home. Are there any other kind of mechanisms that communities can look into?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting the wireless actually has multiple different branches. The mesh approach is one specific branch, which is particularly good at eluding censorship. Um,
Okay.
it's it's harder for it's a non-hierarchical network, and so it's harder to monitor all the different links if there's an effort for either commercial or governmental reason to try to spy on people. And that's one of the reasons that people are often intrigued by them. But there's other wireless approaches that use other technologies. In San Francisco, there's a company called Monkey Brains, and in Boston, there's one called NetBlazer that use what we call point-to-point wireless, which is non-moving antennas. So we call this mobile wireless because I can keep moving around and be connected. Point-to-point wireless is 2 points that use wireless, but they don't move. And so you put it on a rooftop and you go from roof to roof, and you can deliver very high quality capacity there. We're going to see more of that, particularly in large apartment buildings in urban areas. So there's a number of different things that are coming about. But I'll say that I think fiber to the home is the end goal. It's the way to make sure that every home has a high quality connection, because wireless isn't magic. Wireless is typically taking a fiber optic connection and it's sharing it. And so if I take a fiber optic connection and I share it with 100 people, I'm obviously not going to have as good of an experience as if I'm only sharing it with 4 people in my household. Our goal should be to get that high quality experience as close to the user as possible.
So here's getting back to coming full circle and getting back to what I'm going through in my community. So when you guys put this offer out there and we're encouraging cities to apply for the assessment, I kind of thought I was going to be the matchmaker here, because the person in charge of making that decision here in Pasadena has been on your podcast before.
Right.
You have interviewed her. She's a woman named Lori, and I emailed her and I said, "Hey, look, what's happening? How can we get Pasadena involved? You know that I have this task force. I've shown up to a couple city halls. We had municipal internet on a city agenda." And I really thought this was going to be a big next step, and I was pretty excited. She emailed me back and she said, "No, we're not interested." And that was it. And, I'm not trying to speak negatively of her. I'm just a little confused why there was such a split no, or such a quick, rather, no decision. It doesn't make sense to me. I listened to a podcast with you and her when she was talking about all the reasons to be optimistic for more expansion in Pasadena, and they haven't looked into residential yet, but it's something they'd love to look into. And she's all enthusiastic, and it's like, well, here's the opportunity, and you know this dude, you've been interviewed by him before, and nope, no thanks, don't want it. What happened with us is we showed up at a city hall. We got municipal broadband on an agenda. And so they did well, she would describe it as an in-depth study. I would describe it as a rather not in-depth study. But they basically, Beverly Hills is doing a municipal internet project. And Beverly Hills is, among the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. So they're just doing fiber to the home. No qualms about it. They can afford it. They're doing it. So the study essentially took what Beverly Hills is doing, applied it to the mileage of Pasadena in comparison, and said, we can't afford this. Didn't mention anything about net neutrality, didn't mention anything about other options, didn't mention anything about any other community in the country. Nothing. Just kind of said, AT&T's got our back. Spectrum's got us. Sorry, guys. And then I spoke and I pointed that out in a very diplomatic way. And I said, look, I think we need to continue this conversation. There's more than one way to do this. We can't just say, oh, this would be how much it costs because this is what Beverly Hills did. We need to look in other ways and do more assessments. They agreed with me, but it's like, here's an opportunity for an assessment. And we said, no, thanks. So I'm a little surprised and disappointed that my city government has been so non-supportive of this, and I don't know why.
I think your viewers should expect that similar results, frankly, especially on the sort of early stages. And I would say sometimes when people have that result, they'll get frustrated at a person in Lori's position. But the thing to remember is that Lori serves the city and has to take direction from city council. And sometimes there's a perception, oftentimes it's accurate, that the city council has not suggested that they should move in that direction. And so it's important to not put too much pressure on city employees who are often very risk averse and don't want to get out in front of city council on this. So I have a lot of sympathy for a person in Lori's position. But I'll say that when you're dealing with elected officials, one of the things we often hear is they feel like this is not a high enough priority for their voters. And to change their mind on that, you need to have more people contacting them, particularly people, that come from a variety of points of view, some from the business community, some from people concerned about net neutrality primarily, some who are concerned about low income access. You get a dime to basically say, oh no, it's not feasible, we just don't have the money. But the frustration that I have in dealing with that is that, as you said, there's many ways to go about this. Building a citywide network in the way that Beverly Hills has done is not the only option. If you look at I'm trying to remember the name now. It's escaping me. In Indiana, Auburn, Indiana, wanted to build a citywide network, and they recognized that they weren't in a position at that time to fund it. So they built out a part of the city, and then a few years later, they built out another part of the city, and now they have the entire city covered. So we need to make sure that elected officials are first aware of that, and then not using the cost of doing it all at once as a dodge to not even consider seriously other alternatives that would allow you to get there eventually.
So, well, then getting back to this, because there is a deadline right now, and I believe the deadline is Friday. Is that correct?
For the introductory offer. So we've announced that we're doing a beta period in which we're going to pick at least probably four communities in which they'll get reduced pricing. And so the way it works is that if you give us a block of 10,000 homes, it costs $4,000. We charge 40 cents per premises. That's for the normal pricing. For right now, for the reduced pricing, it's 15 cents per premise. So frankly, people that are interested, they have lots of time to work with us in the future. They may even want to just wait and see the results of some of these early tests to make sure that it's something that's relevant for what they need. But will be an ongoing
we got to make sure you
process.
don't just show up to a town drunk or something and just. Right. So this will be an ongoing thing then, is what you're saying. Yes, all right. Well, that's good to know, because I mean, all the stuff you described that I need to do and other people in my community and their communities need to do, you're totally 100% right. But that's not going to happen between now and the 29th, unfortunately.
No, that's good, because our pipeline couldn't handle it if all those folks did all those things by then.
Well, have you been getting a lot of applications?
Yes, we've had what I've expected. I mean, we've had a number of people who have reached out that are interested, like people like you, in fact, who've reached out on behalf of their local governments. But they're in a similar spot. But we've had more. We're gonna have to make hard choices fundamentally, because we've had enough people come in that are in the position that we're looking for, who are ready to get this information. So, but we want to start rolling them out pretty quickly. It's called the Quick Start, and so our goal is to certainly get back to those folks in the next few weeks, and then to post one or two of these studies.
There you go. Froze for once, yeah, just a real quick hiccup, and then you were back.
Well, I'm going to blame you, because I love this. We're on CenturyLink 100 megabit symmetrical. And,
nice. No, it's probably me. I'll take the blame.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your